Hi, Founder fans. Jason here. Welcome to Trivia, because it's Friday night, and that's how we do trivia here. Everyone who's here, let me know you're here so that when we start asking these questions, I can wait for your answers like a very polite young man. While we're waiting, if you guys want to hit like, that's the best thing in the world you can do. We are about to start going. I'm still working on some of the updates. I am going to demo one of the updates I'm preparing for us, although it is not quite ready to play the full game. We are preparing for it. So, anyone who's here, I see there's a bunch of you here, but no one's told me they're here yet. So I'm going to sit here procrastinating or stalling is a better word until someone lets me know they're here because I don't want to be playing by myself. I typed in the answers already, so I know what they are. Jesse White. Hi, Jesse. Thank you for coming. Since you're here, why don't we get started? Let's pop on over to the new trivia screen. Now, again, I am doing some updates, so this is a little bland looking. Deborah, thank you so much for coming. Don't mind how bland it is. We're in the middle of updating. It's pretty time consuming doing all of this, and I apologize. This is unfortunately not yet my full-time job, so you will forgive me. But we're going to go over here. We're going to pop up this first question for you guys who are here early. A little bit of a beginner question, a little bit easy. That's where we like to start. What happened in Boston, Massachusetts on April 18th, 1775. Anyone else just popping in, let us know you're here so we can wait for your answers. This is the first question. You haven't missed much. There are no points except the ones I remember in my mind to judge you forever. I'm just kidding, obviously. But we are having fun here. We're going to learn together. Motorcycles driving by, I can't help, but there's a lot of noise. I can't help it. Jesse White with the shot heard around the world. That's a really fascinating answer. Let's see if Deborah agrees or disagrees with you. Hey, Grey Wheels, thanks for coming. First question, so you're not far behind. My computer says excellent question, but it looks like it's stalling on the side. If you guys see any issues, please let me know. I've worked a lot this week, actually, on making sure that I don't get any bitrate errors or anything of that nature. So if it is stalling out, please let me know. It might just be my computer lying to me, which tends to happen, especially when I have a bunch of screens open up. And I've waited long enough. We got one answer. Jesse, you're not terribly far off. Let's see. Not running enough video. Okay, well, we're going to pop that down there then. Paul Revere's Ride. So, the midnight ride of Paul Revere and William Dawes and Samuel Prescott and a whole bunch of other people on that night took place on April 18th over the course of the night through past midnight. And it was after midnight that buffering. You know what? I think it is the trivia game. We do our computer stuff a little bit later, and that might be what's giving us the problem, the computer stuff. We go to Sporkle and play that trivia game. It's actually one of the things I'm trying to replace with all the work I've been putting in, is so that we don't need to open up that particular website, because it has a lot of pop-up ads, and that slows everything down. So I do apologize if you are getting buffering. We're trying to figure this out. We'll make it perfect one day. But the shot heard round the world probably took place definitely took place after midnight and was technically April 19th. So you're extremely close there, Jesse, but close but no cigar. We're going to keep on going on. I'm going to leave that other screen off until we actually get there to play it. Hopefully that will not affect us anymore. We will move along and do our next question. This is from one of the Constitution cards, not necessarily American Revolution, but we're trying. It is related. So, how can a federal judge declare a state law unconstitutional? It's my pleasure, Jesse. Thank you for coming to play. We're getting better and better. I delayed it about 10 minutes this week because people seem to like to come in a little bit later. It seems to be running fine now that I minimized the other screen I had open on my desktop here. So how could a federal judge declare a state law unconstitutional? You could answer this correctly in a variety of ways. I'll put it like that. I came up with my very brief answer. I'm sure your very brief answers will be close, or maybe they won't be, and we'll learn something new today. That's always fun. Even though trivia is fun, always something. Jesse, coming through with the supremacy clause. Anybody else got any other answers? I'm about 4 seconds ahead of you guys today, so I'm sure you'll be answering while I say this. And yes, and that's just me hitting the wrong button now, isn't it? Man, the build-up, that suspense, and then I ruined it. Yes, the answer is pretty much the supremacy clause, specifically Article 6 of the Constitution, says that the The Constitution is the supreme law of the land. Yes, Deborah, the Supreme Court would rule it unconstitutional because it's the supreme law of the land, and if a state law seems to be superseding a federal law, then that state law is itself unconstitutional. Great. Anyone just popping in? We're just 2 questions in, just getting warmed up here. Let us know you're here. I'll wait for you when I'm waiting for the answers. Go into a true or false, and we're going to go to the hardships of war. I know that's not really easy for you to see, and if I show it too close, it'll mess up my lighting, and I'll get all buzzed out. But we're doing the hardships of war, and the first question is true or false? More soldiers died from disease than from fighting, and Jesse has no patience for me to actually read the question. I'm a little off my game today, guys. I apologize for that. Bro, the jersey was hell from what I hear. Oh, the HMS, as Her Majesty Sir HMS Jersey? Yeah, I understand that too. We're going to pop up and answer that question pretty quick then. Yes, true. More soldiers did die from disease than from fighting. This card says almost 10 times as much. That's hard to determine. We don't know the exact. Gray Wheels come through getting it right. Everyone got it right. We don't know the exact number of soldiers that died in general. Records were kept actually very well back then, but not quite that well. So we're not as sure of all the people who died. But you're right. Much of it was due to disease on ships. Some of it was just due to disease. There was disease at Valley Forge. There was a smallpox outbreak while they were evacuating from Canada after not successfully invading Canada. So disease ran rampant, and it was always a problem. Let's do one more question before we go over there. A lot of them are POWs. That's right, Troy. Absolutely. True or false? In order to eat, soldiers often pillaged food from farmers. I'll be frank. Like I said, I'm taking these questions still off these cards. I'm going to start making up my own questions in the next coming weeks once I finish making this look prettier next to me, or handsomer, I should say. And the reason is I like these cards, I like these questions, but I don't like how a lot of them are asked. So this is true or false. In order to eat, soldiers often pillaged food from farmers. So we'll see what you guys have to say about that. Give it just a second. Yes, but George Washington said don't do it. We got true coming in from Gray Wheels. Deborah with a true. Everyone seems to be saying true. So the answer to this question is true. But I don't love that. I would prefer it said in order to eat, soldiers sometimes pillaged food from farmers. There were times of desperation where they would do it. There were soldiers who did what they shouldn't be doing. It wasn't necessarily often. There were definitely times where it happened more frequently than others, but saying it was often is difficult. I would, and as Jesse mentioned, George Washington did not want you doing that. And there were a few occasions where Washington made exceptions, but he made sure to pay off the soldiers the farmers as best he could. He didn't want to bankrupt Americans. He wanted these people to support America after the war. So to ruin their lives is not a great way to get people's support. But unfortunately, he usually paid them in continentals, which was not very valuable. I'll tell you what, why don't we pop over here to the interweb and do the first of our little games here. I minimized it because it was slowing down the computer and causing all the problems. So let me pop that right back up for you. Here we go. And I'm still in James Monroe. I thought I hit enter. So it's these advertisements that are causing trouble, and I can already see it, like, slowing me down. So we'll play it. It'll be fun. We are going to name the 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence, if we can, unless the computer really hates us. We have 10 minutes to do so. I think we should be able to do this in a lot less than 10 minutes. So, I'm going to hit play quiz since I'm 4 seconds ahead of you. As soon as I see someone tell me a name on this document, I'm going to hit play quiz. And we'll see how it works out. Again, the buffering is new. We've played this game a bunch of times, and suddenly now it's a problem. Slide over, get in the middle for it. I don't know why that is over the last few weeks. I have played with the encoding a lot recently to make it so that it's less of a problem. I don't know why they're advertising as people's bellies. Okay. All right. And we got names coming in. Let's go. Colonel, what's up? Dr. Rush, William Floyd, John Hancock. Adams is 2 correct answers. Reed is a correct answer. Franklin, absolutely. Benny Franks. Adams, we just popped in. That's all right. Button, last name Gwinnett. Hayward. Butts, no, but I do have a friend whose name is Butts. Jefferson, Braxton, Thornton, Lee. Well done. Lee is also 2 correct answers. Well played, Troy. And now it's not buffering anymore, I guess. 2 Lees. Franklin we got. I understand you guys get it coming in at different rates, so no problem. Continuing on. Button is a first name, Deborah. But it's Button Gwinnett. I threw that one in for you before. Payne, Sherman, Morton, Salt. Sherman just did. Absolutely right answer. He signed all the things. All the things. And we're waiting. Oh, Elbridge Gerry did sign the United States Constitution. He did sign the Declaration of Independence, which is what we're playing for. He did not sign the Declaration of... Okay. Walcott is correct. Elbridge Gerry did sign the Declaration, but refused to sign the Constitution. Hooper, yes. Morris is always going to be a correct answer twice on this one. Lewis Morris's younger brother signs the Constitution. Rodney, yes. Oh, everyone's coming through. Stockton, Lynch, Chase, Lewis, Ellery, Rush we got. Huntington. There's usually a Livingston. Paca. I just realized yesterday I never wrote an article about William Paca in all my years doing this, so I'm going to be doing that real soon. John Penn. All right, now we're moving. Just 2 minutes in, despite the computer issues I seem to be having. Penn. Did we do Penn? We did Penn. Bartlett. Yes. Josiah Bartlett. Hart. Nice. Ross. I think so. Paca we just did. Walton, did we do? Not yet. There he is. George Walton. Now, I just covered a Declaration signer last week. Penn we did. Morris we did. Last week, it was the first guy from Georgia who later got Gwinnett and Walton there. Did we do Payne? I think we did Payne. Harrison? Yes, Benny Harrison. The only signer with a son and great-grandson to be president of the United States. Why am I over? Okay, right in the middle. Where's the middle? Hughes, you guys thinking on the same page. I like it. There's North Carolina. Done. Nelson, absolutely. Taylor, if I can spell it, it's right. Smith, of course. Witherspoon, don't want to miss him. Stone, awesome. Lyman Hall, thank you for watching, Troy. Paying attention. All right, who we got? We're about 3.5 minutes in. Whipple, last one from New Hampshire. Yes, got New Hampshire. Clark, absolutely. From New Jersey, we need one more from Jersey, one more from Connecticut, one more from Maryland. We got both Thomas Jr.'s over in South Carolina. Thomas Lynch Jr. and Thomas Hayward Jr. Could we get the Knott Jr.'s from South Carolina? Tell you what, one's a family man. One had a father that signed the Articles of Association at the First Continental Congress, but he himself did not sign. They switched spots for this document. Gerry, I think we got. Before, I had trouble saying that he did sign the Declaration, and then went to the Constitutional Convention where he didn't sign that thing. No, gross. Yeah. Oh, package shipped. Let's get that out of there so I can see who's typing things. Carol with a question mark. No question mark. That's correct answer. All right, there it is. Williams. Do we do Williams? There it is. Okay, we need 2 guys from Pennsylvania. A gentleman from Delaware. Rutledge. There's usually a Rutledge signing things. Yes, Edward Rutledge. He had just replaced his brother, John, who went back to become the first governor of South Carolina. The Rutledge brothers being very important, especially John, a huge American founder. He becomes one of the inaugural justices on the Supreme Court, the second Chief Justice, but then says some things about Washington that embarrass himself, and he tries to kill himself. But he had already, a decade before the Constitution, I believe he signs the Constitution. And then a decade before this, he signs the Stamp Act papers. Hopkinson. Absolutely. Oh, Hopkins. Just Hopkins. My hand trembles, but my heart does not. Hopkins' son is also a correct answer. I almost gave it away. Francis Hopkinson, the artist of the American Revolution. Keene, there he is. Clymer. Did we do Hooper? Yeah, we did Hooper. We are just looking for one more person from Pennsylvania. Middleton is the person from South Carolina whose father left and he replaced him. Okay, we got two more. One guy from PA. And I don't see the other spots. I don't know who the other I'm a little lost as to what we need. Oh, Virginia. One guy from Virginia, one guy from Pennsylvania. One from Virginia, one from Pennsylvania. From Pennsylvania, we've already got Clymer, Morris, Rush, Smith, Taylor, Franklin, Morton, Ross. We've already got Taylor. Right here. From Virginia. Good night, bud. From Virginia, I got a little kid trying to kick in the door on the way to bed. Say goodnight. From Virginia, we have Richard Henry Lee, Braxton, Jefferson, Nelson, Lightfoot Lee, and Harrison. Oh, there it is. Oh, if I gotta type it. With, I believe it's pronounced. George With. Rush we've got. Rush we've got right here. One gentleman from Pennsylvania. We did say Smith. I'll tell you what, right here is George Reed with an A. I think that's a hint. That might not be a hint. Is it a hint? Continue talking. I will continue talking. Okay, we've stalled out. The last person from Pennsylvania. And there's so many names here, I'm even blanking myself. Oh, we got Ross. Is Ross it? Nope, not Ross. Wilson. James Wilson. There it is, Colonel, coming through in the clutch. James Wilson. Well done, team. Took us just over 7 minutes. Average score 26. We got 100%. 26. Ugh. Well, good thing we got 100%. Wilson. Is that a reference to The Cynical Historian? If you guys like more broad history, I really enjoy watching The Cynical Historian from time to time. Although I need to share it with you guys. I meant to share it this afternoon. The History Guy, I think is his handle. He came out with a video about the different tea parties in the United States, which is a lot of fun. Okie dokie, why don't we bounce right back over here to our trivia, and I move around. Oh, that's right, because the other camera's in the wrong spot, because I changed this one, but not that one. Fair enough. Now I'm back in the middle. Yeah, I don't know how people only get 26. Although, 20 out of 50, 25% of 50 is like 12. So, like, I can see people who've never really studied it before trying for the first time and getting, like, Jefferson, Franklin, Adams, and then, like, Washington not working and they give up. All right, quick sip of my water because all the talking I'm doing. Thank you guys for coming. Having a lot of fun here. I'm going to get rid of this last question and go on to the next question. Were prisoners treated well? Again, we're still talking about the hardships of war. And that's my old-timey 1940s radio announcer South Park voice. So, we're prisoners in the American Revolution treated well. The question doesn't specify as to which army, although that shouldn't much matter. Apparently, I'm a little further ahead than I was because of all the buffering, so I apologize. Now, I'm probably like 6 or 7 seconds, maybe even 10 ahead of you. Kinda is not an acceptable answer. Officers, yes. Enlisted, no. Generally speaking, no. Depends, yes and no. Depends, yes and no. So, the answer the card gives is no. Troy's answer is probably most accurate. The Americans like to say they treated the British prisoners better than the British treated the American prisoners, though to be fair, the Americans did, because that was part of their propaganda campaign, was, hey, look, they're so brutal and we're so nice. Though the Americans were real broke and didn't have the finances to really treat their prisoners great, but as mentioned before, I forget who Jesse might have mentioned it. I forget who mentioned it. The prison ships off the coast of New York City and many places on Manhattan Island, including the Sugar House, is often overlooked for just being miserable conditions where people were just ill-fed, starved half to death, and not only malnourished, but then just rich with disease. So not great. Many officers, the higher ranking you were, the better you were treated. Certain men, they are eluding me. I just did a video about Brigadier General in the South who fought the Battle of Great Bridge. Was it Woodford? William Woodford, I think. He was a brigadier general. He was treated like garbage. He was put on a prison ship, but uh, many officers were treated better. Charles Lee was just wined and dined and helped write an attack plan for the British. So it really depends on who you were. 1 out of 3 on the Jersey survived. That sounds like an appropriate estimation for that particular ship, but it was tough. It was really tough. So let's move on to better and brighter things. Very little fighting occurred during what season? What season? If you've ever read about the Jersey, it's absolutely heartbreaking and stifling. Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty beat. Pretty beat. Michael Troy, who keeps coming back to talk to us about generals in the American Revolution, he has, I forget the episode number, but his episode on prisoners of war is really, really fascinating. And you got to give a shout out to Elias Boudinot, who's most famous as a president of the Continental Congress for a bit there. He was in charge of giving prisoners, I forget his exact title, but provisioning prisoners in British custody. So he was basically giving the British goods and saying, can you give this to our soldiers that you have captured there? And yeah, everyone gets it. It's winter. Yes, winter. Well, Jesse, I was going to say that. One of the reasons Princeton and Trenton were so successful is they were surprised. Because why the hell would you be crossing the Delaware when it's frozen? Do you know how cold out it is? I mean, it's south of here, so it's not that cold, but it was cold. And I believe this is still during what they call the mini ice age, where things were like extra cold for a few decades there. So, yeah, winter. Okay. Next question. Why did many wounded soldiers die after surgery? Again, we're doing the hardships of war. That's what I would have sounded like as a radio announcer in the 1940s. There's our boys going to war. You're welcome. Infection, because it was the 18th century. This is another one of those answers where basically anything you say will be different than what I have here, but essentially right. Yeah. Medical tools were dirty. Infection. Sepsis, infection, bad hygiene. Yeah, they would just cut off one leg and go to the next one. And yeah, sharing that blood wasn't so great. Interesting. I don't want to get too off on a tangent, but I read one of the earlier guys learning about infection in the later 1800s was giving births, and he noticed that one of the reasons we learn about infection is women who gave birth, when a midwife would give birth to a baby, there was a better survival rate of the mother and the child than if an actual doctor did. And they were like, why is that? And then the one doctor noticed, well, we're like cutting apart corpses with our bare hands and then not washing our hands and walking over and pulling a baby out. Maybe that has something to do with it. So, side note, I learned that this week, so I figured I'd share with you. Was there a book written by a soldier from the Battle of Trenton? Plum. Oh, something Plum Martin. I think is it James Plum Martin? It's not James. Something Plum Martin. He had a famous diary that he kept, and then he turned it into a book after the war. It wasn't just about Trenton and Princeton. It was about his entire experience. It is a really fascinating book. Joseph, thank you, Jesse. Joseph Plum Martin. My mind escaped my name. My mind. My words. Anyway, it is a great book, but you have to take a lot of it with a grain of salt, as with many memoirs, because he is trying to float his own boat throughout most of it, so he exaggerates his own abilities, which was common at the time. No hate on that particular person. That was very common at the time. The only person I hate for that is James Wilson, because he was a huge scumbag, as we've discussed before. Why don't we bounce over to the following question? At which camp did over 2,000 patriots die from hunger and disease? This question is actually a lot longer on the card, but this is enough of a hint for you guys, most of you, to do a pretty good job getting it right. I have a distinct feeling. And we got one answer coming in. I'll give you guys another second. Take a sip of my drink here while we get a few more answers coming in. At which camp? Package shipped. Okay. Sorry. My phone just turned out all of a sudden and it said package shipped. Don't know what package, but it's shipped. And since Jesse's the only one confident enough to answer this, although like I said, I know I am a few seconds ahead, Valley Forge. Over 2,000 patriots died because there was no food and they got sick. Much like the prison ships. So we were talking about prisoners having it bad. Being a soldier in the Continental Army wasn't always a fine and hunky-dory treat. Now, was it? Yeah. I will also note, I read the questions slow, so as soon as you see them up there, you can feel free to answer, because of that buffering issue we had earlier, I am now even further ahead of you than I usually am. Though, like I said, I've been doing a lot of work trying to make sure it's clear, that frames don't cut out if I move too fast, and that, well, it doesn't have these bitrate problems. Well, apparently. I'm not a computer nerd, I'm a history nerd. Deal with it. I'm doing my best. Well, I guess your best wasn't good enough. Okay, next question. Who wrote Regulations for the Order and Discipline of the Troops of the United States? I'm actually going to go in here, and I'm going to add some apostrophes, because it is something someone wrote, and I want to indicate that to you. Who wrote Regulations for the Order and Discipline of the Troops of the United States? Now, this writing took the place of a previous writing called An Easy Plan for the Militia by Timothy Pickering, who would later be Secretary of State under George Washington and then John Adams, and be a real pain in John Adams' butt. All right. Timothy Pickering, great guy. I do see one answer coming in, stalling right now to give you guys another second or two to put your answers in. It was a manual for the Army. Timothy Pickering was a young man when he wrote his up in Massachusetts, and they used it for a while, and it was fine. But as people are starting to say down below, this other gentleman showed up, immediately won everyone's hearts and minds, and whammy, wrote this. And the answer is Baron von Steuben, which I have a bad habit of saying Steuben. I believe it's pronounced Steuben. I just did a discussion with Michael Troy on this gentleman. I don't know if it came out this week or if it comes out next Wednesday. I can't remember if I have or have not put it out yet, but it's a great conversation about him. And it's him and Thomas Conway, who the Conway Cabal is named after. These two foreigners were promoted to Major General successively. No, it's not Hamilton. Alexander Hamilton never did anything important. Just kidding. Obviously, that's not true. Was it great? Maybe that's debatable, but wasn't important? Absolutely. Yeah, so the Regulations for the Order and Discipline, that's actually better known as the Blue Book, and it was the instruction manual for the United States Army and military through almost till the Civil War, actually. Really important. Oh, you know what? I'm going to pop this back up real quick. I do want to note, it says he wrote it. The truth is, he wrote it in German, and then other people translated it from German to French, and then someone else would translate it from French to English. And it was so good that it made it through all those translations. Burr for life. I was gonna say hell yeah, but I don't know if I can go that far. Aaron Burr is one of the sadly slandered people in American history. He did some very important things. Question number the 10th. Our final question before our big shebang. What happened in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania on January 9th, 1776? January 9th, 1776. What happened in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania? Now, this, gotta go. Jason, the shirt looks great. Oh, Troy, you got it. Awesome. Thank you so much. I hope it's comfortable, right? Like, I like them. They're comfortable. They're not too gaudy, but they're, they have that nice little stylized Betsy Ross logo. I don't know. I really like them. You guys, Troy got one of the shirts. You guys should get them too. Check out link in the description for the whole shop. Bye, Troy. We'll see you when you get to dinner, right? Troy always ends up signing back on, like from his phone when he gets to dinner. All right. And we've got a few things coming out. And people are a little all over the place on this one. I'm going to have to give it up to Jesse. Common Sense is published. Thomas Paine publishes Common Sense. This is the Declaration of Independence is not approved until July 2nd, 1776, sorry, and then the Declaration itself on July 4th. He's back. Thomas Paine, yes, drops Common Sense, which says, why does a little island in Europe rule this entire continent? That sounds pretty stupid. As for, there was another one, I saw the British took it over. The British would come a year and a half later to Philadelphia in the fall of 1777. Just as Benedict Arnold is winning Saratoga, of which Gates takes all the credit, George Washington is losing Philadelphia. Okay, great job, team. So that is all of the questions. Now we're going to go to our big show, but I'm going to give you a little pre-taste of what I've been working on. That's not done, so don't judge me quite yet. But this is the new game I'm working on for us to do our fun time. I'm going to stop the countdown. So right now, we can't go through all of them. I don't have them all ready yet. But why don't you guys name for me the signers of the Declaration from New Hampshire? Go. Now, I know we already did the Declaration. That's fine. But I'm right now filling in all the people who signed the Declaration of Independence. Oh, and I'm way ahead of you. Okay. I just saw it change on the side. We got a Bartlett. So what I'm hoping to do is have the Declaration. We can see how long it takes us to go through each signer of this document. I'll end up eventually adding all the documents that were signed. Maybe eventually get all the Continental Congressmen. I can start adding people from different states. I can just make it a giant list. William Whipple, absolutely. My boy William. And one more. Again, we already did this a little bit. I was trying to finish this up before we started today. And Thornton. There we go. Whammy, guys. You got him. 14 seconds left, despite being way ahead. Actually, I'm now about 15 seconds ahead of you, despite being 4 seconds when we started. So you guys got that real quick. All right. Which is amazing. So again, I'm still tidying it up. Like you can see, like the names aren't even centered properly and things like that. I want to make the whole screen look nicer for you guys, especially because so many people come in and click on the video while we're doing it, and like only a very, very small percentage of you have actually stayed to play compared to the like literally thousands of people who click in or like not and bounce out. So I'm trying to make it more appealing. I will get there, I assure you. Now, for anyone who's new here, we are about to play our grand finale game. A game that I'm essentially trying to replace with that model you just saw me making, where we could just go through them on our own, especially because the website, as you've seen, slows down my computer dramatically. I hope to buy a really fancy, expensive computer one day, but again, one step at a time. This is a hobby for all of us. We are going to name 243 American founders. They are specifically in the legislative branch, so soldiers don't necessarily count, military officers, or executive branch members don't necessarily count, but they don't necessarily not count. What we're about to do is name not every member of the Continental Congress, but almost every delegate to the First Continental Congress, every signer of the Declaration, every signer of the Articles of Confederation, every delegate to the Constitutional Convention, and every member of the first class of the House of Representatives and United States Senate in 1789. I will pull it up here. No, here. I closed it again because it was hurting out our stuff. Bring it right back. And here it is. And Colonel's already going for it. I always recommend starting with the big six. I'm about 15 seconds ahead of you, so I'm going to wait for a few more answers to come in. I do see Colonel saying Washington. I'll take a sip of water as you guys start unloading on me, and then I'll hit start, because, you know, that 15 seconds at the end might matter. Yes, because I only just see myself pulling it up now, so I'm way ahead. And Colonel was way ahead, and you guys are going for it. Washington, Franklin, Adams, Hancock, not the big six, but I'll take it. Floyd, Rush, Ash, good one. And it stopped. Okay, oh, and now I'm moved over again. Okay, there we go. Monroe, count them. Morris is probably 3 answers? 4. That is 4 correct answers. Morris is probably the best answer you can give. Hall, DeHart, Walton, Hart. Oh, and Ashley's not here. Oh, well, maybe next week. Jefferson, yeah, don't want to forget the big six. That's why I say name them first. Because those will be the ones at the end where we're like, how did we miss George Washington? Bartlett, did I do that one? Yep. Smith, Collins. Keep coming. I'm being patient. Oh, Rutledge is 2. Great. Silence. Dead air. Dead air. Oh, Hamilton. There he is. That's one of the ones we'd be pissed about. Thank you, Jesse. Sinixon. Haka. Burr. No, he never served in the Continental Congress or in any of these. He becomes a senator in the mid-90s, 1790s, and then, like, skyrockets up to get the 4th most amount of votes when John Adams wins the presidency. Jefferson gets the 2nd most amount of votes, then Thomas Pinckney, then Aaron Burr in the first, like, not George Washington election. So he skyrockets in popularity. Despite what you may have heard, Muhlenberg is probably 2. Gwinnett, absolutely. Hooper, J. Ingersoll. Very good. Dana, Parker. What's up here? Just bouncing over here. Okay, where was it? Parker, Steele, absolutely. Davy, yes, Bland. And Colonel has taken over. No one wants to help. Don't be hesitant, guys. Give us names. Lee, absolutely. Lee is what? At least 2, if not like 4 correct answers. Whammy. Anyone else? Anyone else? I literally just see all Colonels with a few Jessies in there. Harvey, did we do Harvey? Nope, there he is. It's okay to get wrong answers, guys. Don't be embarrassed. Don't be bashful. We just did all those signers of the Declaration. We need all those names again. So at the very least, try to remember them names. Although, and it hasn't said we're having any trouble for a while. But you guys might have already typed a bunch of answers in, and they're just not coming through. Gary and Ellery, nice. Elbridge Gary, real important guy. William Ellery is interesting too, because when they signed the Declaration of Independence, he actually sat at the table they were signing. Everyone will walk up to the table, stand there, and sign it. He actually sits at that table so we can watch everyone's face while they're signing it, which is kind of creepy, but also really interesting. He knew he was watching history, and he wanted to witness it. Henry, absolutely. Hayward. So we got Henry. Is there another Henry, but a little something at the beginning of the name? Oh, McKean. Speaking of Henry. Wink. Alright, someone left because I was asking them to play along. Sorry, everyone. Clymer, if I spell it right, is correct. Georgie C. Oh, Madison. Wow, that's probably the longest it took for us to get Madison. Ever. I would imagine. Oh, Morton. Did I miss that? I did. Okay, Reed with an A. Stockton. Absolutely. John Stockton of the Utah Jazz. No, Richard Stockton of the New York Knicks. Wait. Richard Stockton of New Jersey. William Few, absolutely. Clark, from also from New Jersey. Hughes Jr. You're getting all right answers. Just coming also. Cadwalader. Is that two? No, it's just the one. Although both brothers were involved in the American Revolution. Anyone just popping in, if you're new here, we're naming Continental Congresspersons. Drayton. Last name is all we need. Absolutely. Drayton, the youngest person to sign the Constitution. George Wythe. Dayton. Dayton, Ohio is named after him, I believe. Bourne. Yes. From the Matt Damon movies. Of course. I've never seen The Bourne Identity, but I understand it's about the American Revolution. Wolcott. Don't you know it's insane? Galloway. Yes. Was a Continental Congressman despite turning loyalist and spending the rest of his life in Britain. Counts. He signed the Continental Association that started the boycott after the First Continental Congress. He actually came up with the Galloway Plan of Union at the First Continental Congress, which was an attempt to settle things. Didn't work. Middleton is probably two correct answers. Yates. Robert Yates walked out of the Constitutional Convention with another New Yorker. Livermore. Chase. Because believe it or not, New Yorkers were extremely small government back then. Schuyler, absolutely. The father of those sisters in that play. Paca, we did, but it's correct. Doesn't make it not correct. Braxton, Tony Braxton, famous R&B singer. Anyone just showing up? We are doing our grand finale, naming as many American founders as we can, specifically Continental Congressmen. Vining, John Vining of New York. Carroll, if I spell it right, is two correct answers. I'm actually surprised it wasn't more. But Daniel Carroll was John Carroll, I'm sorry, was important. He was never actually a member of the Continental Congress, but he was the first, ends up being the first Catholic bishop in the United States. Payne is right. Taylor, yes. Mason, absolutely. Wilson, Wadsworth. Okay, we're starting the Worths. And that's usually where Ashley pops in, but she's not here right now to help out. So, can we pick up who else has Worth in the name? Nelson, yes. Thomas Nelson Jr. I believe he died under. No, I'm blanking on his passing. I'm confusing him with Thomas Lynch. What I remember most about Nelson is that the only known image of him is as a young boy. Rodney, Caesar Rodney. His nephew and namesake, Caesar Augustus Rodney, would be an, I believe, Attorney General for Thomas Jefferson. Bloodworth, Timothy Bloodworth, a major anti-federalist in North Carolina. One of the reasons North Carolina doesn't join the Union until after George Washington is already president. And then he's an inaugural member of the House of Representatives because North Carolina really didn't want the federal government doing anything. All right, taking a pause, taking a breather, taking a break, seeing what happens. Looks like it's going to be a tough day, guys. Answers coming in slowly. Not a lot of people helping. Okay, let's see if we can give hints. We need some declaration signers from Virginia. And we just need a bunch of declaration signers. At this point, anyone popping in late, name some declaration signers. Giles is right. Biddle is right. That's a great answer, Jesse. Trying to give hints. There's a lot of hints to give. More, yes. Blount, absolutely. Brown, I believe so. Any other colors? If anyone's popping in, we are naming American founders from the Continental Congress. Grayson, if you know, anyone just popping in, if you know a sign of the Declaration, that's a good place to start. Broome, Butler, Borum, don't want to miss Borum, the first Continental Congressman from Brooklyn. Butler, did I do Butler? I did. Caswell, nope, it's not Caswell, it's Caswell. Anyone just coming on board? We are naming signers of the Declaration of we are naming Continental Congresspersons. So if you know any signers of the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution, give me their last names. We'd love for you to play along. Page, absolutely. Hanson, Coles. Okay, these are all right answers. Moving a little sort of Rober Joe. There it is. Moving a little slower than normal today. There's a few less people actually participating. There's more people watching silently than usual, but that's okay. Lawrence. Yes. Henry Lawrence, not John. His father, Henry, was the correct answer there. Johnson. Wincoop. All right. We're starting to fill it up. Let's see. Ooh, New York's a little barren. Oh, we got lots of names to go halfway through. Otis. Oh, yes, James Otis, the only person who technically shouldn't be on this list. He doesn't really fit the qualifications, but he was extremely important. Though it does make me a little upset. Joseph Warren is not on this list, despite arguably doing more than James Otis, but doing about the same as James Otis. Fitzsimmons. Holda. No. Nice try. St. Clair. Whammy. Right now I'm scrolling through. It's not helping much. We need a bunch more declaration signers. We need some Constitution signers. Give me your names. Give me your best guess. Klingon. There it is. All right. All righty then. Okay, we finished the cards. There's another Worth. Langworthy. Absolutely. Good hue. If it helps, football player last names actually often work. White. Absolutely. Houston. So, I'm going to help out. Hudson. Hutson. But there's also Houston with an O. Houston. And then there's also Houston. Houston. I know it's confusing, but hopefully that helps for next time. Thatcher. Leonard. Ingersoll. I think we did Ingersoll, but that's definitely a correct answer. Grout. Alsop. You know, I did Rufus King the other day. It was kind of a long one last week. And I forgot to mention that his father-in-law was Alsop, John Alsop from New York, who refused to vote for independence, but did start the company that imported secretly the things from France that we needed to win the war. Scudder. Daniel Scudder, the doctor that died in battle. Brearley, head of the Committee of Postponed Parts. Crane. I don't know anything about him. Genzi. Is it Stephen Crane? I think the name is. That's all I know about. Oh, King, you're right. I gave that one away, Jesse. Whoopsie daisy. Boudinot, I did mention before also. Elias Boudinot. What's interesting is there was a young Native American man who I want to write an article about. I need to do more research on him first. A young Native American man, I believe he was from the Cherokee, but I might be mistaken. He ends up going up to traveling around, becoming a leader of the Cherokee, but one of the leaders of the group that wants to assimilate into white culture. And he becomes so friendly with the much older Elias Boudinot after the American Revolution that he actually changes his name to Elias Boudinot. Humphreys, Sherman, I think it's Patterson, Chase. Must pop Chase in already. Did I do Humphreys? I think I did Humphreys. Yes. Alright, guy. Oh, Goldsboro missed all three chances to decide something important. Spate. Richard Dobbs Spate. Another guy in a duel. Tillman. Yes, Matthew Tillman. Helfair. If I spell right. Matthew Tillman, a really important Maryland leader, not to be confused with his nephew, Tench Tillman, who is the guy, he was an aide-de-camp to Washington. I'm actually a little disappointed he was left out of the Hamilton musical because he was one of those guys. And he's the one who rode from Yorktown back to Philadelphia to inform Congress that the war had been won. Cini, Fonte, Strong, Martin, Williams, Jennifer. Daniel of St. Thomas Jennifer. His middle name was of St. Thomas. His family was not from St. Thomas. That was his middle name. Mercer. Mercer, and it's not you, Mercer, who dies in battle, who they reference in Hamilton. That's a different Mercer. Sturgis, I don't know. He lived too early to have Sturgis in was it South Dakota where the racetrack rallies are. It can't be named after him. Even though the Louisiana Purchase was made, he was probably still alive. They hadn't gone out there really, and there's no way it's named after him. I don't know that. I'm just assuming. Trumbull, good one. The Trumbull family is real important. Ward, uh, Sevier. So I mentioned earlier how William Ellery sat at the table when they were signing the Declaration to look everyone in the face. William Ellery actually replaced Samuel Ward because Samuel Ward passed away in March of 1776, just before independence was voted for, while in Philadelphia, and missed his shot to sign the Declaration and vote for independence. So Ward replaced him. I'm sorry, Ellery replaced him. Sevier. Oh, we must have done Sevier. Van Dyke, I don't think we did. Are there any more Vans? Mifflin, Van Rensselaer. Van Rensselaer. Lynch. Van Wilder. Lynch is a fun one because it's not so much fun. So there were two Thomas Lynches, Sr. and Jr., and Thomas Lynch Sr. goes to the First Continental Congress, and then goes back to the Second Continental Congress, and he has a stroke and can't go up the street to Congress. So his son, Thomas Lynch Jr., who was just fighting in the army and a little sick himself, was sent to replace him at the First Continental Congress. So even though they were both from South Carolina, when Thomas Lynch Jr. signs the Declaration of Independence, his father is just around the corner, very far from his home and also sick. And it's sad because Lynch Jr. tries to bring his father home eventually, and he dies in Baltimore. And then Lynch Jr. makes it home, but he's sick too, so he takes a boat to the Caribbean to get some of that Caribbean air the doctors would recommend, and he dies at sea. He's lost at sea. So the Lynch family is kind of sad. They were so close to being the only father-son team to sign the Declaration, and fortunately neither thing happens. Lovell, Folsom, Gunn, Hanson. We must have done Hanson. Bedford, Gunning, Bedford, great name. Foster, that's like at least two. Gilman, Wentworth, do we do Wentworth? Nope, that's one of the worst. Gorham, I've talked enough about the chair committee of the whole recently, I think, to go too deep into that. The Wentworths are interesting. Wingate, Gadsden's interesting too. He's often called the Paul Revere of the South. He's from South Carolina. One of the few people who went to the Stamp Act Congress in 1765 from the South. He goes back and then he makes the famous flag, the yellow flag with the snake that says "Don't tread on me." That's the Gadsden flag, and we still see that on people's yards today. Gew, Matthews, Walton, must have done. Duane, just reading about him. I'm going to write about his son-in-law soon. Dickinson, there you go, guys, on the same page right there. Really glad we got Dickinson. He's a huge founder. Like I call, was it Washington, Adams, Jefferson, Madison, Monroe, Franklin. I'm sorry, Washington, Jefferson, Adams, Madison, Hamilton, Franklin. I call them the Big Six because they're the Big Six. They're the big founding fathers that everyone knows. But there's a little bit of a bigger group. When I say the Big Six, John Jay, John Dickinson, they're in there. Nathaniel Greene for his services in the Army could be lumped in there. Maybe Henry Knox, though that's a pretty big stretch. Maybe Roger Sherman, though that's a pretty big stretch too. Robert Morris is not a stretch to say, they're one of the main players in the Revolution. Bassett, I think we did. Oh, no, we didn't. Dana, we did. Williamson, Blair, Williams, I think we did do that. Aesop, I think we did. I mentioned that earlier. Or Alsip. Hosmer. Yale. All right. We're winding down. Not having our best showing today, team. That's all right. We're having fun, though. Dean, Silas Dean. He's up there with one of the most important. Patterson. Dean is arguably the most underrated. Because without him, France doesn't help us in the war. I know everyone likes to say Ben Franklin showed up and Saratoga was important, and Ben Franklin was important. But if Silas Deane wasn't there setting the groundwork first, France doesn't get in time to help. Burke, Crane, oh, did Crane, Sumter. Excuse me. Oh, Uger. Unfortunately, I'm about to run out of time. As you can see, oh, Pinckney is too. Right at the end there. Because I am, like, now probably 20 seconds ahead of you guys because all that buffering. Okay, team. Well, not the best showing we've had. 74%. I mean, the thing is, 74% is not bad. We named 180 people. But still not bad. Okay, you know what, Jesse, before we go, I'm going to respond to that. No. Silas Deane was not filling us up with unqualified French officers. Silas Deane went to the Continental Congress, was eventually replaced, but instead of going home, was asked by Ben Franklin and the Secret Committee. The Secret Committee was the one responsible for quietly getting France and Spain to come help. They, led by Ben Franklin, they asked Silas Deane, hey, instead of going back to Connecticut, can you go to France? We're going to make up a fake company under John Alsop, who ends up not wanting to declare independence and kind of stepping aside for the revolution. His daughter would marry Rufus King. Deane goes to France, and while he's over there, he is operating in secret. He could, if the British find out about him, a war could break out. So he quietly gets France to send us arms and clothes and foods and supplies and most of the things we need for the army. Silas Deane gets before the French join the war. Silas Deane also gets us, yes, many French officers. Now, before we say filling them up with unqualified French officers, most of them were very qualified, and that was the problem, is they were coming over not just as officers, but brigadier and major generals. So you have Americans who had been fighting by the time the Frenchmen get here for 2 years, and now they're getting passed over for promotion by some random Frenchies that they don't know. But from Deane's perspective, he was sent over and they said, hey, can you get any help? Get help. Get help. Whatever you can do. Here, we have no money for you. You don't speak French. You've never been an ambassador before. Go help. And he does. He gets us the Marquis de Lafayette. He gets us Baron von Steuben. He gets us de Kalb. He gets us Pulaski and Castruccio, whose name I can't say. They weren't all French, but a lot of other soldiers were coming into France to find the Americans who needed help. And when Silas Deane returns to the United States, he returns in the flagship of the French Navy, in the cabin with the Admiral of the French Navy and the first ambassador from France to the United States. Now, unfortunately for Silas Deane, he was friendly with Franklin in France, but there was a third ambassador, Arthur Lee. And if the name Lee sounds familiar, that's because Richard Henry Lee was his older brother. And they also had another brother, Francis Lightfoot Lee, who also signed the Declaration of Independence. So Arthur Lee has two brothers signing the Declaration of Independence. So when he's writing letters home, making up lies about Silas Deane stealing money, his brothers believe him. Silas Deane, his career kind of ends when he comes home because they want a trial for him. He wants a trial to prove, like, no, I just saved America. Like, sorry I sent a few too many qualified French generals. You couldn't squeeze them all in the army. I just saved this country. And he ruined himself financially doing so. His major problem is he thought he was going to come to America and then go right back to France. So what he was doing was he was keeping his letters and his records, because he was a spy, he was keeping them secret in his notebook, where he mixed his official transactions in with his duties as an ambassador, an unofficial, quiet, down low ambassador. He mixed them all together, and he left those books in France. So when he comes to the United States, they're like, "Can you prove what you were doing?" He's like, "No, I thought you were going to send me right back." So he waits for so long, and then he can't. He eventually just quits and says, "I'm going to go home. If you're not going to give me a trial, I'm going to go back to Connecticut." And he does. His son Jesse is still in Europe, luckily studying with his friend John Quincy Adams, under the care of John Adams, in the Netherlands. Eventually, he does go back, and I don't really want to spoiler alert it, but like he goes back to Europe trying to reclaim any kind of his money and make his name back. He's been slandered. His image is tarnished because he did such a good job saving the United States that his image gets tarnished. And then he actually ends up getting on a boat finally in the late 1780s to come back to the United States after a decade gone. And he just kind of dies under mysterious circumstances. And it certainly appears that he was poisoned. There is a book somewhere next to me called Unlikely Allies: How a Merchant, a Playwright, and a Spy Saved the American Revolution. It is my favorite book. There are three main people in it, one of which is Silas Dean. Silas Dean is the main character. If you ever take the time to read a book, or I'm sure it's on audiobook by this point, Unlikely Allies. It's one of my favorite books because there's also two French people. One of them's a cross-dresser who I am not going to spoil you whether it's a man or a woman, but throughout their entire life, they kept switching genders for various reasons, and because the King of France told them to change genders, they were blackmailing the King of France, King Louis, during this whole period where Louis is secretly funding the American Revolution through Silas Dean. He's also being blackmailed by this crossdresser who's living abroad in Europe. And dude, it is the craziest story. It is oh, Colonel, you read it. It's amazing. And it's true. And that's the crazy part about it. Richard Joel. Oh, here it is. Joel Richard Paul is the author. I have it literally right next. So definitely do it. We did great for such a small group. Yeah, we almost got to 200. That's right, Colonel. We did pretty good. Lafayette was turned away, and he pulled to the Sure, Lafayette was 19 years old and one of the wealthiest people in France, arguably the world. So don't feel too bad about him paying his own way. Again, what I took exception with, Jesse, not that you're wrong. You're right. You've heard the right things. I took exception with unqualified because these were very qualified officers, which is why they were chosen. Certain ones, like Lafayette, had to pay their own way. They said the same thing to Baron von Steuben when he got here, too. Because the thing is, the first few people who showed up didn't do so. Duquay, I can't remember the pronunciation of the first guy's name, but the first guy who shows up does a terrible job. He just, like, a terrible job. And that one guy soured them to many of the French generals. And again, a lot of the people who were angry wanted to be promoted from brigadier general to major general, but now there's a Frenchman out of nowhere coming in. Yeah. Sounds like Lafayette cross-dressing. Yeah. I don't know if Lafayette cross-dressing, but I cross-dressing is the only like way I can relate. Like, that's not what they called it back then. It's very, just read up on it. Beaumarchais, it's just, no, Beaumarchais, that's d'Eon, the Chevalier d'Eon. Oh, yeah, Colonels, Chevalier also helped the Russian royals as well. Spent like 2 years, right, so, like, that's the story. Like, you read it, so I'm not going to spoil it for you, Colonel, but I don't really want to spoil it for Jesse, because it's that good a book, but, like, yeah, he's a young man who's kind of effeminate and is sent by King Louis to Russia to dress as a woman and teach Catherine the Great French. Which, side note, Catherine the Great was alive during the American Revolution. I think everybody had to disguise himself as well. Oh, yes, you're right. He did go under the guise of a woman briefly, is the story. I forgot about that. You're right. I did know that Lafayette cross-dressed, but not for decades. like Chevalier d'Eon lives as a woman for like 40 years, and as a man for 40 years. So like it's fascinating. Yeah, so I highly recommend Unlikely Allies. It's probably my favorite book about the American Revolution. Just because the story is so fascinating and it's such an interesting perspective. Because for a long time, before this book came out about 10, 15 years ago, everything you heard about Silas Deane was he was crappy. He was doing a bad job over there in France. But that's because everyone knows Richard Henry Lee is a really famous leader, and his younger brother, Francis Lightfoot Lee, also signed the Declaration of Independence. Uh, Really important family, the Lee dynasty of Virginia. They're extremely important. So the story most people have been telling for so long was the story heard from Arthur Lee, the third ambassador over in France during the Revolution. It's really interesting too, is because Benjamin Franklin is like one of the most famous guys, and he was a lot closer and friendlier and agreed with Silas Deane a lot more than Arthur Lee. Arthur Lee was writing back talking trash about Franklin. In fact, there were questions about Franklin's abilities because Arthur Lee was so good about lying to his brothers in the Continental Congress. All I'm saying is that his friends. All right, fair enough. Yeah, I highly recommend it. Didn't Lee get sent to the rear? I'm not entirely sure what that reference is. If you're talking about Arthur Lee, he fled a battle. Oh, oh, you're thinking of Charles Lee. Charles Lee is unrelated to Arthur Lee. The Lee family of Virginia, the main core were the brothers. There was an older brother, I think, named Thomas, who mostly stayed home. Then Richard Henry Lee is really famous. He was like one of the leaders of Virginia pushing for independence. Lee's the one who stood on the floor of the Continental Congress and resolved to have independence declared. His younger brother, Francis Lightfoot Lee, was kind of like on board. Actually, I think was it Teddy Roosevelt or Walt Whitman? Or Mark Twain wrote like 100 years later about Francis Lightfoot Lee. I forget the exact quote, but essentially said he was just like the most pointless bureaucrat. He just did what his brother said. I don't necessarily agree with that, but I thought it was funny. And then they had two more brothers, Arthur, who went to France for a time. They were Arthur and William were both physicians living in London when the revolution breaks out, but their brothers are throwing the revolution, so they leave London pretty quick. Arthur is appointed as an ambassador to France with Silas Deane and Benjamin Franklin, and then William goes to the Netherlands where he works with I think he briefly goes to the Netherlands where he's with John Adams, and then William goes to like Vienna or something like that. There's also a cousin of theirs is Henry Lighthorse Harry Lee, who was really important fighting the war, and Lighthorse Harry Lee was the father of Robert E. Lee, who is the leader of the South in the Civil War. So the Lee family is big. There's also a Charles Lee in that branch of family who ends up being an attorney general under John Adams. Now, the other Charles Lee, who you're talking about, who fled in the battle and was kind of not everyone's favorite general in the war, he was unrelated. If they were related, it was super distant back because Charles Lee was born in England and he lived in Britain. He fought with the British Army around the world before settling in the United States after the French and Indian War. And then when the war breaks, the American Revolution breaks out, that Charles Lee decides to join the Continental Army because he knows he'll get a pretty high promotion right away. And he does. He's appointed a major general pretty much right off the bat. Washington is commanding general. And then it's Artemus Ward, who's the highest ranking major general, mostly because he was already commanding the troops in Lexington and Concord, the makeshift army that showed up. He was commanding them before before Washington got there, before there was a Continental Army, when it was the Union, the name's escaping me right now what they called it, but so it's Washington, then Artemus Ward, and then the number 3 guy in the Continental Army right off the start is Charles Lee, who had only lived in the United States, or the future United States, for like 4 or 5 years, but he wanted to fight. He does some good things right off the bat. He goes down to no, okay, Jesse. So it's made up of militia, but they called it the Continent, not the Union. Um, uh, uh, it was made up of the militias, basically of Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, and New Hampshire. And they came up. There were a few names they called it by. It is really eluding me. It wasn't the Continental anything yet. It was the Army, the I'll look it up after I'm done with this little spiel here. But that Charles Lee ends up first. He goes to south. He fortifies parts of New York. He goes down south, helps fortify Charleston. He gets credit for defending Charleston, even though that is all William Moultrie. He goes back up, and then he just thinks he's better than George Washington. And he's eventually captured because he's far away from his army. Washington's been saying, "Send troops. I need troops in New Jersey. Send me troops." So he casually starts walking down. He goes to a building several miles from his army. He's leading an army of thousands of men. Goes several miles from the army to stay in a house where he's captured in the middle of the night in his pajamas. He's then brought to New York City, where his old friends, the Howe, General Howe, leading the British Army, he's old friends with him. He stays with him for. To be fair, Lee was treated like garbage at first. When they figured out if he committed treason as a former member of the British Army, or if he should be a prisoner of war from the separate American Army. Howe is a pretty nice guy and actually treats him as a prisoner of war after a little bit. Brings him in, they wine and dine together, and Charles Lee writes out for General Howe exactly how he would go about beating the American army. He then goes and rejoins the army once he's released in a prisoner exchange. Washington doesn't know he's being a jerk behind his back and is super glad to have really his number 2 guy back. Because Artemus Ward gets a little sick and kind of moves away. Artemus Ward stays in charge of New England, but all the fighting leaves New England. It seems like Washington never really loved Artemus Ward for whatever reasons. They were cordial and friendly, but he never really trusted him with any more commands. Lee he trusts with the command. He says, "Why don't you go at Monmouth? Why don't you take the lead on this?" And Lee says, "I don't know. It's below me." So Washington says, "All right, Lafayette, you take it." Lafayette's like, "Hell yeah." And he goes to fight. And then Lee says, "Well, you know what? I'm a higher rank. I really should be in charge." And Washington says, "Okay, go do it." So Lee catches up to Lafayette, takes his army from him, and starts leading at Monmouth. Now, to be fair, at Monmouth, it's there are soldiers trying to move a cannon back, and Lee actually tries to help them. But far away on the battlefield, someone else sees this happening, and they think Lee is retreating. So they order a retreat. And then the next general down the field sees that army retreat, and he orders a retreat. To be fair to Lee, he does try and halt the retreat, but he doesn't. And that's what you're thinking about. Washington comes up, sees men retreating, is like, "Why are you what? Why are you retreating? We were attacking an army from the rear as they were moving." And then he meets up with Charles Lee and famously loses his temper. Washington could generally keep his temper very reserved. Last week we discussed his rules of civility. But when he lost his temper, he lost it. And yes, that was kind of the end of Charles Lee from there on. He ends up getting court-martialed. He does get absolved for most of it. But that's pretty much the end of his career. Man, I really went on a rant there. He fled the field. Yeah, like a Confederation type of deal. Lafayette said, "Say less." No, the Army of Observation. That's what it was called. When Lexington and Concord happens, the Minutemen all run out and chase him back to Boston. And then all the rest of the militias in New England, who weren't the Minutemen, like they weren't going to wake up in the middle of the night, but we'll go fight tomorrow, which is most of the militia, by the way. The Minutemen were a very select group. They all go to Boston, and they're like, "How can we help?" And they just kind of all coalesce under Artemus Ward. So he accidentally becomes the commander-in-chief of an unnamed army. And they essentially call themselves the Army of Observation. I'm sorry, Historically, we generally call them the Army of Observation. I'm sorry that eluded me for during that story, that name. Because they were observing what the British were doing in Boston. And then during that time, Artemus Ward, he's commanding general for the Battle of Chelsea Creek and a few other engagements. And then the Battle of Bunker Hill is under Artemus Ward's command. Now, Joseph Warren deserves a lot of credit for his role there too, but he did get named a major general, and he was technically in charge of that battle, though Warren, I love Joseph Warren for a lot of reasons, but he had no experience leading men, and he knew that in the field. So he ends up running to the front of the front lines and doesn't survive, which is a shame. He's martyred and very heroic, of course, but not the greatest decision because he was such an important person to the movement. And then days later, George Washington shows up and takes the reins from Artemus Ward, though I brought up Joseph Warren because several people have argued to me that George Washington wasn't going to take the army from Artemus Ward. He was going to take it from Joseph Warren. But officially on the books, it was Artemus Ward. This day, we don't know where 6 cannons are buried during the Revolutionary War. Yeah, I actually spoke to someone not too long ago who said one of my neighbors said that when they were younger, they were up in the Adirondacks and they were like at their, I think it was like a family member's cabin. They were building a cabin and they were like digging out to level the ground and they found a cannon, like a whole cannon. And I think that was a 1812 cannon, but still really interesting. Guys, we've run significantly over with this little fun story here. I hope you guys enjoyed it. You guys were watching. So I've been doing some read-alongs. I'm hoping to do one tomorrow night. But I was thinking about doing more rants like this. I have a few. Like I want to talk about John Adams' relationship with Napoleon was one. I'm going to talk about some of the earlier presidential elections and some of the other guys who aren't involved in that or received votes. Like specifically, I'd like to talk about the first election where George Washington won unanimously, but also like 12 other people got votes for president. So let me know if you enjoy that. Other than that, have a fantastic weekend, and I will be back. I'll be back every morning with a pre-recorded video, and I'm not entirely sure. Oh, I also should say next week's a little messy. Trivia will be fine, but I will have to move our weekend review because my spouse will be out of town again. Good night, everyone. You like the rants. I hope you had fun. Anyone just tuning in, sorry you missed the whole thing. Trivia was fun this week, and peace field.